You're listening to the Run for Your Lives podcast.
Hey everyone, welcome to the show. I'm Daphne.
And I'm Pake.
And this is the Run for Your Lives podcast.
This episode, we are talking about the British adventure horror film The Descent, which is written and directed by Neil Marshall, released August 4th of 2006. I didn't realize it's been that long since this movie came out. Man.
I know. 14, 15 years? Almost.
Yeah, it still feels
14
kind
and
of
a half years?
Yeah, newer, but then I was like, oh, it has been that long.
Yeah.
Yeah, this week I am very excited to announce that we do have a special guest with us this week. The one and only Jason Cabassi.
Hello!
Welcome to Run for Your Lives.
Glad to be here.
And,
that was my first thought too. Like, what? This came out that long ago? Like, I remember when it came out and people said it was good. And I was like, oh, I gotta see that. So in my head, this is the movie that just came out that I'm gonna see soon. And now freaking 16 years or whatever have passed.
Yeah.
I know.
It's crazy.
I can't believe it. Time goes fast with movies.
But I'm glad you guys prompted me to finally watch it. This is my sort of motivation to get off my butt and actually watch it. So I was really glad about that.
Yeah, well, probably more get on your butt to watch it. I don't know.
I'm standing the whole time.
Yeah. I'm hoping, Jason, that it didn't scare you too much.
It had a lot of jump scares.
It did.
So my nerves were pretty shot after watching this. But I like scary movies. We just did Host on Walking Dead cast.
Yes.
Yes, you did.
Speaking of that, I have to... Since we have you trapped on here for a little bit and you can't go back out now, that you're here. That's the reason is I have to give you a little bit of credit and praise. And so you're going to have to deal with it, Jason. But no, because I said at the top just how I'm incredibly honored to have Jason on here. So I'm going to try to make this the quick version. But yeah, no, it's awesome. We've had other guests on here that I love dearly and they're awesome people that I've also admired and love podcasting with. But this is really special to me. And so for those who don't know, honestly, having this man on here, having Jason on this podcast with us, if it wasn't for Jason, this podcast would not exist. So I do want to definitely give him a lot of credit because he mentioned it, the Walking Dead cast. He hosts his own podcast. It's been going for 11 years now, basically 10, 11 years.
Over 10, yeah.
Yeah. And it's the first podcast I ever listened to. Because he got me into podcasting as a fan, listening to podcasts because of him and Karen. Because it was one of those things, he runs a Walking Dead podcast, the Walking Dead cast. And so back then, it was probably season 2 or 3 of the show. And I just needed something a little bit extra, more than just talking to friends and, other people who watched it and going on Reddit or whatever. I was like, I'm going to check out these podcast things and see what's going on with that. So I just put in the Walking Dead into my Apple Podcasts. And, Walking Dead cast with Jason and Karen was the first thing that came up. And I was hooked immediately. Loved listening to Jason and Karen's insight and voices and jokes and, them, responding to me through feedback and stuff. And so it was this kind of real big connection. And then through that, joining the Patreon group, after years. So it's 8 years later or whatever it's been since I started listening to his podcast. To think about having him as a special guest on my podcast is a really cool thing. And so I just have to give you that credit and that little bit of background and praise because it's really cool to have you here. And I'm glad we did.
Well, that's super nice. I appreciate it. I remember first meeting you, I think it was in Dallas, right? At a Walker Stalker.
Yeah.
And it was. One of the first listeners I ever met. And right away I was like, oh, what a great guy. And then now to have got to know you over the years through the group, just how sort of socially responsible you are. I really admire that a lot, and that you're not afraid to speak your mind about the things that you believe in. And also, now you're in Podcastica, so pretty much you over at Strange Indeed with Rima and everything. So I'm proud to know you, and I really appreciate that. Thank you so much.
It's cool. It's really cool.
Well, Pake and I actually know each other because of that Facebook
Yeah.
group. And
Yeah. It's another aspect of it is me and Daphne met because we're Deadcast fans and through the Patreon group and all the different, Zed Head community and stuff that's been built.
I'm waiting for some marriage to develop out of that. Hasn't happened yet.
Hasn't happened yet.
Nope.
Who knows? A lot of us in there.
You never know. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I could sit here and talk hours about just how awesome Jason is,
Aw,
but we've got a movie to talk about. So
Yes, we do.
Let's move to a much more unpleasant subject. Death and destruction.
Oh, goodness.
Yes.
Oh.
So Daphne, why don't you go ahead and get us
Creepy
started
things.
off with some of these behind the scenes tidbits, and then
Absolutely. That is what I do. So while the movie was set in North America, filming took place entirely in the United Kingdom. The outside shots were filmed at Ashridge Park, Hertfordshire, and in Scotland. Neil Marshall directed a really cool movie, 2002's Dog Soldiers, which is a great film that I recommend people see. It might be something that we cover here in the future. He also directed 2008's Doomsday, and he did the Hellboy reboot that came out in 2019. And he directed 2 episodes of Game of Thrones, which was the Blackwater episode and the Watchers on the Wall. A tongue-in-cheek nickname that production gave to this film was Chicks with Picks, and I found that quite funny. The budget was $4.7 million, and it brought in $57.1 million at the box office. And it is 100 minutes long.
The thing about it being set in North America and filming, see, like, I didn't know anything about the movie, really. I knew it was about caving, and there was probably a monster involved. But you hear the British accents. Oh, this must be a British film. And now I find out it is, but it's set in North America, which I didn't really realize while I was watching it. I thought it was in Scotland or something. And then it's like, but the filming took place in the UK. So there's all this like back and forth.
yeah.
Yeah. It's pretty incredible how the movie came together. And I have some of that information that we'll talk about later in our production notes.
Cool.
But Pake, why don't you give us your quick synopsis of The Descent?
All right. So if you haven't already seen it and are just listening blind, but I can give you a little bit of incentive to watch it. Here's our synopsis, where a caving expedition goes horribly wrong as the explorers become trapped and ultimately pursued by a strange breed of predators. Yeah.
Ooh, and are they a strange breed of predators?
Yeah.
They are very creepy. Very creepy.
Got some thoughts and stuff on what they are.
I thought
that
they were
we can
nice.
get to later.
Fine.
they were kind souls, really.
Yeah, misunderstood.
They met you with a welcome basket with fruit and some pie.
And ate your face.
And then ate your face.
It's a give and a take.
Yes.
Cool. Well, as we get into here, for listeners who listen to, multiple episodes or most of our podcast here, that we kind of have a very loose, just kind of character driven and stuff conversation. But when we have a guest on here, to make it a little easier and let the things flow a little better, we like to do a top 3 format. And so, Jason, as our special guest, let's go ahead and get you started off. What is your number 3?
Yeah, I was okay. So now, I was a little confused because I listened to your Day After Tomorrow episode, which I thought was awesome. By the way, I'm glad you put so much emphasis on the whole climate change thing. It's really cool.
Yeah.
But I didn't hear a top 3, and I'm like, oh, I have no idea what to take from that. Like, I was hoping to get some clues on, but then you said top 3. I'm like, okay, cool, I know that.
Yeah.
Anyway, it flows
Yeah.
very well the way you guys do it. I don't know how you do it, but maybe I can take some notes later. So my number 3 is Sarah, who I think is the protagonist, and I think that this is a cruel movie in a lot of ways, but I still dig. I mean, it's a horror movie, so that's par for the course, but there's a lot to admire about it. I really liked it, by the way. But when Sarah rammed her pickaxe through Juno's leg towards the end, at the end, I hated that in the moment, and it made me like the movie. I was like, I just like this. The movie went down a couple of notches for me. Just like, really, you found out your friend cheated with your husband, and so you're going to actually murder her, basically, because hobbled her. But then I thought about it for a bit, and I realized, well, she's the protagonist. The title Descent on the surface is about descending into the series of caves, but it's also about Sarah's descent into madness and insanity. And so I kind of wanted to follow that path. Like what brought her to that point where she would do something like that? And I mean, she loses her husband and her cute little daughter in a horrible car accident. She keeps having, and one way to tell that this is all driving her crazy is she keeps having these dreams related to it and hallucinations. She dreams in the hospital of her daughter blowing out the candles on her birthday cake, sort of this the birthday that she'll never have. And then she's running down the hallway with the lights going off behind her. What do you think that was all about?
I feel like it was her coming to the realization that her deepest, darkest fear was about losing her daughter.
Yeah, and she was running away from it, right? Yeah, like, I don't want to face this.
And I think she was trying to run as fast as she could to get away from it. And then when she kind of runs into Beth, and Beth has to be the one to kind of tell her what happened, I feel like you can see the realization on her face. She was just traumatized.
Yeah.
I mean, she was traumatized. We don't know how much of that accident that she actually was awake for. Did she see the pipes hit her husband? We don't know that. We're not really given that information. I get the feeling
that when she woke up, she didn't know whether her daughter was okay. And neither did we. We're right there with her for a little while. But then, what's the woman's name that was holding her? Beth. She's gone, and I'm like, crap. So then they, meet up a year later with all her friends. She's clearly still grieving. You can tell she's trying to put on a brave face, but she's upset. Then she dreams of this rod shooting through her head as she's looking out the window of the cabin. She's taking pills in the morning, probably to keep her calm, or I don't know. What do they have? Antipsychotic? I doubt it was that bad, but
I worried about her with that medication. To me, that started the trigger of she's taking medication. If she's going to be trapped in this cave without it, that's not going to help, because you're going to want that to be with you.
Yeah, but I think it was a relatively short time, considering that their batteries lasted through the whole thing. I don't know how long that would be.
Yeah, that's true.
It wouldn't be like multiple days.
That's true.
But
I mean, they went in early in the morning, and it was still daylight whenever she escaped at the end.
Yeah, could have been the next morning. But, Then they, in this fragile state of mind, she's being subjected to all these horrors in the cave. Like when the bats first came out of that little crevice, she reminded me of Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds, the way she reacted, just totally.
Yes.
Shaken.
Very, very much like Tippi Hedren, for sure.
Then she gets stuck in this passage and has a panic attack, and then nearly gets crushed to death. And there she blacked out. And at first she's only having hallucinations when she blacks out. And she sees the daughter with the cake again for a second there. Then she finds out that Juno lied to her, and these caves are actually unexplored, and they're stuck and they may die. Like, that's bad. That's bad enough, but in this mindset that she's already in. And it's interesting to me that this is like almost halfway through the movie. They're basically fucked before they ever see a single monster, you know?
Yes.
And then then they attack. She's the first one to see one of them, but I think her friends probably didn't listen to her, in part because they know that she's in a fragile state, and maybe she's even told her that she's been seeing her daughter or whatever. And then I won't go through every single one, but she sees them eat her friend Holly, and she's having to deal with these monsters. And then she's having to summon the courage and the rage it takes to kill a bunch of them brutally. And she ends up bathed in blood. So she's like freaking Rambo or something. And then she sees her friend Beth. And that's where she's confronted with that Juno cheated with her husband, and also may have left Beth there to die. And so she's got to deal with that. And I think at that point, it's like well, if you're going to find a place to focus all of your rage on everything that's happening, it was with Juno, because not only did Juno cheat with her husband, and I think maybe she intuited that caused him to space out during the drive, so that indirectly caused her own daughter's death, but she also led them into this cave based on a lie and killed all her friends. So then when you think about it that way, like, yeah, this, and also she's in this hyper mode that she just had to kill all these beings. And so she's just like, that was the moment where it was just too much and she broke and just, you're the focus of my rage right now. You killed my husband. You killed my daughter. You killed all my friends. And fuck you. So even though I don't like that still, it made sense for the movie when I started thinking about it. Like, that's the natural place for, and just the idea of the descent into madness, like that's the natural place for all of this to end.
I think it's really cool you broke it down that way, because that's in my notes. I say, you know, out of vengeance, she chooses to stab Juno on the leg, and to make a Walking Dead reference, there's like Otis her to escape.
Yeah.
And even in my notes, I say, I personally do not agree with this choice. I don't believe that Juno deserved that. And I still stand by that. Like you said, like, I still think that's a pretty weighty choice to make. And I don't think Juno did deserve that no matter what she did. However, I'm glad that as you broke it down, it makes sense for Sarah and her character in the state that she has been put to at that point.
And I do have to say, Juno is a reckless person. Like, she cheated with Sarah's husband and then wanted to have this trip. I think she felt guilty. She's saying, I want us to be like we used to be, which is a very human thing, but reckless. And to bring them to this cave without telling anyone, that was really fun. I mean, it's a typical horror movie trope of people doing dumb things, but still, it's like, God, I might want to kill you, maybe.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like too, I feel like there were several catalysts in this movie that continued to push Sarah towards the edge. And I think losing Beth, who to me represented the constant support, because the others, based on what we saw in the movie, Beth was the one that had been there for Sarah.
Mm-hmm. The others all apologized for not having been there.
And she was the one who helped coax her out when she was in that very tight space just before everything slammed down, and she basically saved her life. They did lose the rope bag, but that was secondary. Sarah was freaking out, and Beth just coaxed her through that to get her onto the other side. Yeah. And I think Beth represented so much more than just being a friend. I think she was that solid person in her life that supported her. She was the one who was at the hospital hugging her. If you remember, Juno...
She couldn't face it.
Juno was all up in her... She couldn't face it because she had lost her lover, despite it being her friend's husband. She didn't run to them and all have a group hug, supporting each other. She just turned around, broke down, turned around, and walked away. Beth was the one that comforted Sarah the entire time. And so I think that was one of the key things that started to push her, or one of the key things that pushed her towards what she did to Juno, because there was that point at the end before she stabs or pickaxes Juno. You just see her face. Her face is like fear, terror for a lot of the movie, but when she is looking at Juno at the end, that's instability, anger, frustration. Like, she's pissed, but it also looks like something has snapped.
It's the look you never want to see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't want anyone to ever look at you that way, or you might be dead in the next couple seconds.
Yeah, before she gets stabbed, like, she recognizes that face. She's like, oh, shit.
Yeah, she does.
This doesn't end well for me, does it?
No, it does not.
And so,
and then I did want to mention one more thing. So, then we got to that point, and then just to fully show her descent into madness, she slips and falls next to some bones, and then the light changes and she sees an escape route. She goes up, and when she came out of the hole, she reminded me of Bruce Campbell in Evil Dead.
Yes, Evil Dead.
But she gets in the car, takes off, and then pulls over, and then there's that fucking diesel truck, and then she sees zombie Juno next to her. And then I don't know, did you guys see the other ending? So this is the British ending. That's what I saw. There's two endings.
There are two endings.
And in the British ending, she then all of a sudden it's revealed she's still laying back there. That whole thing was a hallucination. And then she sees her daughter again with the cake and saying mommy or something, and it's really sad. And then you see what's really going on. She's just looking at her own torch, but now she's fully awake and having a full-blown hallucination. She's not even unconscious anymore, and you hear the monsters like maybe coming for her, who knows, are off in the distance. And so that just to me symbolized like, okay, she's completely gone now.
Interesting.
Yeah, I saw the U.S. release, which ends with her seeing Juno, zombie Juno.
Which that doesn't make as much sense to. I mean, I guess you're supposed to surmise that she's probably hallucinating this whole thing, but I preferred seeing that little extra thing of her back in the cave, even though it's super bleak.
Yeah, I think because the U.S. version actually leads into the sequel that came out, because there was a sequel a few years later. And so the U.S. release that ends with seeing Juno kind of leads into that sequel.
I was wondering about that because I started reading the synopsis of the sequel, and I mean, it's right in the beginning. So can we say? So
I don't.
From what I read, so yeah, she's alive. She made it out, but when I read that, I didn't realize there were two endings. So I'm like, okay, so I guess she was back in the cave and then she did actually crawl out after that, or I don't know.
Yeah, it gets confusing. It really does get confusing. I've seen both endings, and it depends on the day of the week which ending I prefer.
Yeah. Well, it's cool because my number 3 itself was also Sarah, and like actually aptly named. I titled like Sarah's Ghosts, and that was a lot of just like that madness and stuff of her kind of being haunted by the memories and like the tragedy of the loss of her family. And then, so most of my notes cover pretty much everything you already talked about, is like her descent through descent. Yeah. It's like, it's a cool double title that way. And, but at the end is, when I said, it's not necessarily a happy ending. And I saw I guess it would have been the American version where she gets out and then she's sitting on the side of the road and sees Juno. So with that, I said, just add that to the ghost that Sarah will be haunted and tormented by.
Yeah, I can see that.
For a little while longer anyway.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, for however long it's going to be. I did not see the second movie, so I only know like a synopsis and the start. I don't know really what happens. It did not do well at the box office. It barely made its budget back.
I haven't seen it, and I don't know if I want to, because I don't know if I want to mess with the story. I was like, I kind of like where it's at.
Yeah.
I want to see what it got on Rotten Tomatoes.
I think it was around 50 to 55%. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that makes sense. This felt like a really tight movie, simple, and probably best left alone. But it made good money, so they made another one.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's usually what happens. Whether it should be made or not.
All right. So, Daphne, what is your number 3?
My number 3 is cinematography, effects, and little attention to little details. There were a lot of components in this movie that I think made it work, and a lot of it had to do with the cinematography. Like Jason was just talking about, Sarah, like the light change, she's laying down and she looks up and there's just like this diagonal crawl for her to come out. I just found it really impactful the way that they set that up. I also liked how she, put her hand out through to reach the outside. I liked that, but there were also other things, specifically with Sarah, that I found impactful. Just the way that they shot her when she was peeking out of what looked like a blood pit, but I'm not really sure. I thought it could also be something even worse.
What would be worse than a blood
her coming
pit?
out of that?
Should I not ask?
The creatures have designated their own little toilet area.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, that's where I'm going. Yeah, that's where I'm going.
Yeah, there you go.
Yes, it's kind of gross. And seeing her peeking out of it, it was very creepy. I liked also how they used night vision through the camera for her to be able to see things. And how you didn't always see the crawlers, which is what they called the creatures. They were called crawlers. You didn't always see them up close and personal, but they'd be in the shot. The characters wouldn't see them at all, but you just barely see them. They're walking by and one's hanging on the ceiling. They don't see it. And you just see it and it jumps you just a little bit. Or they would drop down at the most craziest times, just at the right moment to make you jump. There was Juno had a brief underwater fight, the way that they shot that when she was fighting with the crawler. The final battle when Sarah has stabbed Juno in the leg and Juno turns around, she rips the pickaxe out and turns around, and the way they shot it for her to be turning around and then suddenly you see all of them standing there, all of the crawlers there, I liked some of the things that they did. They were just moments like that. The music too. I thought the music, which was very little music,
which is good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it wasn't overpowering. You heard a lot of breathing. You heard their clothing moving. You just didn't have a lot of things to interfere with your connection to feeling in the moment with them. And I liked that.
But less is more sometimes. Sometimes they would just be looking down a cavern and then you hear, whoa. It's even just that little sound is what's going to happen? Why?
Yeah.
Yes. I liked that too. And I liked how once they had the cave in, that's when you started really hearing the creatures more. You would hear in the background, you would hear something and it just made you think, oh my God, this is going south fast. It's going to happen. I loved the way that they did the makeup, especially Holly, when she had the bone break, the way that they did it was really cool. It had silicone skin and bone fragments, and it was just really cool how they made that work. And it was done by the wonderful Paul Hyatt, who did another movie that we've covered on this podcast called Attack the Block.
Oh, nice.
It's one of our favorites.
Cool.
Yes.
Yeah, I had a little joke thing in there where she's like, I said, I think I hurt my leg. And I was like, well,
yeah,
bone snapped in half and sticking way out of it. So I think hurt's a little bit of an understatement, but
Yeah, for sure.
That just grossed me out. You never want to look down and see that. Then I think I think this is kind of true to life, where when something like that happens, maybe at first you're kind of like, oh, I think something might have happened here. And then as time goes on, you get more into shock, and incapacity, freak out. But right at first, maybe it doesn't quite hit you all at once.
Mm-hmm.
They really focused on little things. Like when Becca was getting dragged away, she broke her fingernails, from trying to scratch. I just liked the little details. It wasn't just this simple pull. It was, she's really fighting to stay alive, and you could see that. But then on the flip side of that, I liked how when Juno and Sarah are facing facing each other at the end, they barely say a word. And then, Sarah just shows the necklace.
I know.
And it was so impactful just to do it that way. I really appreciated that. I just really liked some of the way that they shot it. I think the directing and cinematography was really, really good. And I like how they, like I said, pay attention to the little things. I appreciated that a lot in this film.
I did too. I felt like there was a really confident hand behind the filmmaking, and it also felt not Hollywood to me, but more of an indie feel, which I liked. And they had the very deliberate camera work, which is kind of what you're saying. But there were lots of close-up shots, or there'd be a close-up shot on Sarah's reaction that no one else was seeing when other people were talking. Like when someone mentioned, I'm going to have a lot of babies when I get older, and you see her face fall, but no one else noticed that. But they'd point the camera in interesting places, and sometimes they would point at something and then follow its motion, or just really artistic kind of things like that, which I really appreciated too. I thought it was great.
Yeah, it was artsy. I got that indie artsy feel too, and I like that.
Right. And that can be distracting if not done well, but I think it was really good here.
Yeah. I appreciated it.
Well, like I said, my number 3 was also Sarah and kind of her stuff, and I talked what extra I had. So, Jason, we get back to you on a number 2.
Okay. So, I just wanted to talk about caving a little bit.
Cool. I was hoping you'd bring this up.
Yes.
Because when it came out, maybe it was a year later, or maybe it was right when it was in theaters. My girlfriend, who's now my wife, Jenny, she told me she liked the movie, and she's a caver. I don't know if you guys knew that. She does it as a hobby. Yeah, okay. And she said she liked the realism of it more than most caving movies, that the tools they used, I guess, and the techniques and stuff. I mean, I'm sure there were some fudges here and there, but I remember her saying that. And it just reminded me how years back I thought maybe I could be a caver because I liked going in the more touristy caves, like maybe that first cave they were supposed to go into. I might have liked that. But Jenny took me into a couple of harder caves, and there was one in particular where we went down and like rappelled down into a hole, kind of like they did at first, not quite as majestic as that, but and then I had to go through this narrow passage that was about 15 feet at an angle and barely wide enough for me to fit my body. And when I got about halfway down, and I couldn't even take a full breath because my body would take up too much of that passage, I started to feel like I'm about to freak out right now. I can't do that. Like when they were telling Sarah, just breathe and calm down. I'm like, that's what I had to do. I had to go, no, I can't freak out. What would that look like? Just start crying. So I just start breathing and calm and get through. And then when you get through and you're in another bigger cavern, I still felt like, okay, I'm not feeling as claustrophobic here, but, I don't like the fact that I can't just get the hell out of here. It's going to take me 20 minutes to get out, even though the entrance isn't that far away. Like I decided then, nope, caving's not for me.
Well, all those tight passages, like, cause you have to go through that to get through it. But then you have to know that like, I have to do that again to get back out. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it really scarred me a little bit. And one of the women, I think it was Sam, said you can get dehydration, disorientation, claustrophobia, panic attacks, paranoia, hallucinations, visual and oral deterioration. I'm like, 1, 2, 3. I've had 5 of those, like at least 5 when I was doing it.
Big no.
And this time when I was watching it and the rocks were falling as she was going through that passage, because I was feeling claustrophobic just watching it a little bit.
Yeah.
But Jenny just happened to be looking over my shoulder at that moment last night. And when it started to collapse, I'm like, does that really happen? And Jenny, who always wants to kind of promote caving, she's like, actually, yeah, it can if you're in an unstable cave. I'm like, what? She goes, I don't go into those. So it really interesting. There's this whole global community of cavers, and they have all their, they take it really seriously. They have like best practices for safety and equipment, and they have meetings where they talk about all of this stuff, and they love to go in and map out the caves, and they just are so into it. And there's a lot of beauty there, but I decided, I guess I'm too claustrophobic, so it wasn't for me. But one other thing just quickly is, what I love about caves in this movie is, it's a great setting. And one cool thing about it for a horror movie is how dark it is. And I have a MacBook Pro that has a touch bar, which is this little bar that can change functions on your keyboard depending on what you're looking at. So when I was watching the movie, it changed to like a timeline of the movie, and so you can scrub back and forth if you want, and it actually shows like still scenes from the movie. You can't really see them though. I think it might just be partial, but I could see that the movie started out light at the beginning of the timeline and then got really dark and darker until it was super, super dark towards the end, and then light. I could see that before I even started watching, and I'm like, that just feels like, descending down into a cave and then
that's cool.
Back out.
Coming back out. Yeah.
Cool setting.
You mentioned kind of like that community of cavers, and I'm with you. I am way too claustrophobic, and
Me
like
too.
I would not be able to handle something like that. Like just the feelings of claustrophobia and stuff while watching this movie, I was like, there's no way in hell you're going to actually get me in that position. Yeah.
It's way worse.
That's not going to happen. But yeah, you said I got like a tiny little taste of kind of that community, and saw like, it's like, at least like through Reddit, like all the Reddit threads and Reddit communities and people online, because I was doing a little bit of research after watching this movie on just like one tiny little thing. And so when you mentioned, I even have in here that like Jenny would maybe even know more about this, but it was mainly Juno was using a lighter. I noticed, they were trying to figure out which way to go, and she'd be checking all these different little openings with a lighter, and then it would flicker, and she'd go, this way, this is the one to go through. And I'd heard about that before, but I was like, let me look into it, which it turns out, and this is where I said maybe Jenny could even say more, is like, it's not necessarily like the best tried and true way to do it from what I understand. And I'm no expert, definitely. But I said what I've looked up was like, it's to find a breeze coming from an opening up top.
Yeah.
And so, but it says, through the little bit of research I did, that the danger of doing that is that there are also drafts that are built into caves that if you follow that, it could actually take you deeper into the cave itself. So if you're using that method, make sure you know what you're doing with it, that like any paths that you see that flicker come from, make sure they are pointing up, and make sure that, they're not, too tight. And then there's all these like extra steps you have to take versus just finding where the breeze is coming from. But yeah, I thought that was cool.
Yeah, because they got to the one point where they're like, there's no breezes anywhere. Just pick one. There's monsters.
Yeah, we have to get away from them as much as possible, as quickly as possible.
Yeah. But yeah, that's cool. Anything else, or is it?
No.
Cool.
Yeah, that's it.
All right. Let's see. Daphne, do you want to go first? Or you want me? Because we kind of switched up around on the first time. So
I'm totally fine to go next.
all right. What's your number 2?
It's no surprise that my number 2 is the crawlers.
All right.
Because I thought they were really well done. And so I dug into it a little deeper to find out, what were they thinking when they put this together with these creatures? Because they were really realistic looking, like the effects were realistic, and even like they had close-ups where you could see that they were blind, but you saw their they just zoomed right in so you could see their faces, the eyes, and everything, and that really creeped me out. But the director, he had a lot of different things in mind when he was putting them together. He wanted to create more of a colony feel instead of it just being male crawlers. He wanted to have more of a colony. So the differences between the males and the females had a lot of hair, which we saw when Sarah, I believe, the one that jumped on her back after she killed or took care of Beth, that was a younger child, crawler. And so the mother came and she was not pleased, as we could see. But those were some of the things that he did. And then the father came later and Sarah took care of him too. So they have like these colony groups down there.
Yeah.
Just a nice family.
You go into their home and just start slaughtering them.
Yes. Yes. Exactly. So originally when they were doing the design, they had them look more wide-eyed and creature-like, but it didn't test really well. So they decided to make them look more human or humanoid. So they look like they might have been cavemen or, just something that more closely resembled a human being. So you could see in looking at them that they weren't far off. Like, yes, there were some definite differences, but there were also a lot of similarities.
I love that because I was expecting like lizard people or something or creatures. And when I saw she saw the first one and it looked like Gollum, hunched over, precious. I was like, oh, that's creepier. It's creepier that they're so close.
Yeah, because she first says, like, I saw a man down here. Who is that guy? Like, maybe he can help us. Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, no. Really. No, I don't think so. They also blended in really well with the shadows, which I thought was cool. Like, you didn't see them till you saw them. Like, it wasn't like, it was definitely interesting how they shot it. They also, the director, Marshall, he banned the actors from looking at them before they first appeared in the movie because he wanted to get that reaction from them right from the beginning. He didn't want it to be more staged. He wanted it to be really authentic, so he pushed for that. Just to make it different. And I originally thought, they didn't go above ground, so that's why, they've acclimated to this dark, damp environment, but they actually must have gone above ground to hunt. So although they couldn't really see, they used sound a lot, like a bat. Like Sam said, she told Juno, you're fighting something that's like a bat. They rely on the sound to hunt. it just made me think of them as non-winged bats. I mean, they were, but they still could climb on the ceiling. So it was just
That's
really interesting.
Non-winged bats, because they also went for the throat a lot, and that made me wonder if that was like how the vampire legends got started. But I hadn't connected that with the vampire bats. I don't know. But yeah, and the sound thing, like the clicking, or whatever.
Yes.
I think I read somewhere maybe that's echolocation. It's a way for them to bounce sound off and get a feel for their surroundings.
Yeah. When it was Sam and Becca were laying down, they had like laying down together in the cave, just trying to stay as still and silent as possible so that the creature that was just beside them didn't sense them there. And then all of a sudden, Sam's watch goes off, and that blows that almost completely out of the water, but they were able to escape. You could see on their faces, like, how they were just so terrified of doing anything. They couldn't, I don't know how they were even breathing. It was just, it was really impactful. And I think that Neil Marshall did a really good job making and morphing these to be a bit different than some of the creatures we've seen before.
Yeah, they were really different. I mean, the whole movie was fresh and original in a lot of ways, and that was one of them. And it's interesting to think that they might have been like just an earlier branch of humanity that evolved into this other direction. But one thing, when Sarah, when they were trying to help Holly after she broke her leg, and Sarah, I thought she heard like a little laugh. And then that's when she went off and looked and saw the first one.
Yeah.
But it sounded like a kid.
It did. And I think that was in her head.
Oh,
Maybe.
Okay.
Because I watch it. I watch with subtitles just so I can get quotes or make sure. And that's it said Jessica giggling in the subtitles, which was her daughter's name. And so I think she is hearing. Yeah, it is these like hallucinations of her kid.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's one of the things that I think Sam or one of them said. All these different things that can happen to you in a cave.
Strange
you may
things.
Hear your dead child.
Yeah. I think it further just solidified that was not a place Sarah should have ever been taken.
No, she was not ready for that.
Really.
No.
I mean, Juno. Yeah. No, not at all. She was obviously
they should have went to the bar like
upset.
they were joking about early on.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and a barn dance. That's something.
Yeah, I mentioned that. I was like,
said,
especially if these things would have been happening for a while, like before this cave situation. If she's been having these dreams and hearing or seeing things, it's like she doesn't need a caving expedition. She needs psychological help. Like
maybe a spa day.
Yeah,
exactly. Yes.
Right.
Yes, good massage.
Yeah.
Facial.
Needs something good for the psyche.
Would go a long way towards.
Not like I see you're having trouble coping with the loss of your family, and you're having these dreams and visions. So let's put you in a dark cave where you'll be driven to hallucinations.
Right.
Yeah. No.
My philosophy is if there's no risk, it's not worth doing.
Man.
Oh goodness.
Fuck you.
Yeah. It's crazy.
Yeah.
So, Pake, what was your number 2?
My number 2, I have, and we talked about it a lot earlier, but was, because I had Sarah's ghosts, and so now I have Juno's lies, and a lot of where that leads to the big, issue of this movie besides the creatures themselves. And so, to give a little background on Juno, because it seemed like, this friend group that they've been meeting, they go, because we open up with them whitewater rafting. And so it's like, this is like the high adrenaline, crazy, friend group that goes out and does these things together to experience the craziness and fun of life. But it seems like Juno's kind of the leader of that group in a way. She's the one that spurs these like adventurous trips on. She's the one that plans everything and knows what's going on. But as I watched, because I did see it whenever it came out, but I don't remember if I mentioned this at the top of the podcast or before we were recording, that even though I did see it when it came out, it's been so long and I forgot literally everything, that this was basically a first watch again for me going in, because I did not remember any of the characters or story or anything. So I'm kind of piecing things together brand new, almost like watching this. And so I don't know if it would be like a negative aspect of the movie that it was like really like easy for me to figure things out, or if it's just like I could feel good being like, oh, I pieced a bunch of stuff together before they confirmed it. But as I'm watching, I was just kind of, and I was like, did Juno really take them to Borum Caverns? Is what I hear. Is like, you know, I don't think the stuff they're about to encounter, because I did remember at least that there's these creatures that they meet up with. I was like, I don't think that that's part of a tourist attraction, quote unquote. Like, they would have noticed that kind of stuff if this was that place. I was like, I don't think. And then, of course, then you get while they're in there, and Holly's like taking like, you know, these pictures or, you know, videoing it. She's like, this place is way cooler than I thought it would be. And Rebecca's like, yeah, the guidebooks, this doesn't sound anything like they were saying. I was like, this, because she did not take you to this Borum place. And then when she admits that. And so I was just like, wow, because they talk about having this flight plan. Because Rebecca brings that up. She's like, well, we gave them the flight plan that we have to where, you know, if they don't, you know, if we don't come back to camp, they're going to come looking for us and they know where we are. So it's fine. It's like, except you gave them the plan for Borum Caverns and not this place that Juno has just secretly taken you all to. And it's like, there's a level of stupidity there.
So dumb.
Yeah.
It's like a double mistake. You're not telling people where you're going, and you're going to an unexplored place. Like, fine, take a risk,
tell someone
but
where you're going.
tell somebody
that
where
puts
you
that
are,
nail in the coffin.
really
It's just like,
yeah,
if you've been doing this for so long, you know that's a terrible,
it's
terrible
dumb
idea.
at that point.
And then, then I pick up.
They're young.
Pick up again on something else. Sarah's late husband, Paul, had cheated on her with Juno. And the first time I picked up on that is when Sarah, I think it was right after, you know, they get her out of that tunnel that collapsed and she's having a hard time. And people are like, you know, why would we bring her through here after everything she's been through? And Juno says, we all lost something in that crash. And the way she says it, I was just like, oh, like she lost something as far as she lost a lover or whatever too, even if they didn't know about it.
I mean, after the raft in the beginning, the whitewater rafting, Juno was walking near him, and there was some weirdness between them, and she kept looking at him, and I thought right then, I think they're fucking.
Yeah, it was one of those things that,
but I wasn't sure. I just filed that in the back of my head, and everything confirmed it along the way.
Yeah, it's hard to pick up on the beginning because you're not really sure who all the characters are yet, and so you're.
But still, they were like, something's going on with these two, and he was distracted.
He touched her hair, like she had like braids, and he just picked up her hair.
Interesting. Yeah. So yeah, it makes sense. So when she says we all lost something, and I was like, okay, like it definitely solidified it for me. And so,
when she grabbed his ass, I was like, there's something.
When they went to the car and did it, had a quickie real quick between scenes.
Yeah.
But then I thought something might be up. No,
it was like shaking back and forth. I'm not sure what was going on there.
Yeah. But you mentioned even that, then he's really troubled and seems like something's bothering him. And that's what causes that wreck that kills him and their daughter. And so, like you mentioned, Sarah would be then putting all those pieces together. That's why she would blame Juno, is because I knew something was wrong and something was bothering him and he wasn't telling me something. And it's all you. It's because of you. And so then again, we talked about that because then it ties into what we talked about earlier with Sarah. But I will give, like I said, that benefit of the doubt, I guess, where I was like, she didn't deserve exactly all that. But I think it is what Beth said to Sarah that also pushed her that way. And I don't think that was necessarily a fair assessment of the situation. I mean, I'm not going to put blame on a woman who's been stabbed through the throat and is dying. She's going to, but the way she says, Juno did this to me and she just left me here to die, almost making it seem like it was a purposeful action. When we clearly see.
Maybe she didn't know.
Yeah, that we clearly see that it was an accident at the moment it happened.
Maybe she didn't know, though.
Yeah.
I mean, you would think she would suspect it might be an accident given that that's her friend. Yeah. But I'm just saying, if you walk up and tap somebody and they kill you, you might not know.
Yeah.
I don't know. But you're right. But what am I saying? When I also felt like, that's a little contrived that she's acting like she got murdered by her friend here. She did this to me. Don't trust her. I'm like, really?
Because it puts Juno in this light that's a little bit more villainous than she really is.
Yeah.
But,
I mean, she was one who didn't want to leave the caves without Sarah. They're like, the other two are like, let's get out of here. I can't leave without Sarah. So I like that because I like gray area stuff where people are flawed, but they're not
for sure
mustache twirling villains.
But then, again, it all comes down to her lies. And I think the final lie that put the nail in her coffin was before they kind of have that final showdown with the creatures before Sarah escapes. And they're sitting there together. They're the only two left alive. And she's asking, what happened to this person. But whenever Sarah brings up Beth and Juno's like, oh, she didn't make it, says, did you see her die? Did you watch her die? And when Juno tells her yes, that's the final thing that Sarah needs to be like, okay, then I know what I have to do. Because
Beth was such a pivotal person to Sarah. She really was. She was the one who stayed. She was the one who cared.
And and that's one thing I left out about the trauma that Sarah had to experience was she had to kill her best friend with a rock.
Yeah.
That was pretty harsh.
Definitely.
Yeah,
you wouldn't want to have to do that.
Sad. Yeah.
So that's my number 2. I kind of think is because I had like the things that tie into why they had such a horrible time on this caving trip. Yeah, is kind of Sarah's madness that she's going through, Juno's lies that led to a lot of this stuff. And then I can go ahead and say my number 1, I talked about the creatures, which we've covered a lot, but I do have a few extra things, so we'll get to there when we get there. But yeah. But Jason, what is your number 1?
Mine is about the brutality and the bleakness of the movie, and not just the gory scenes, but just the overall, like on many levels, I feel like this was almost like a mean movie where it's like it's jarring, and I feel like I'm being slapped repeatedly watching this.
Oh, yeah.
It doesn't sound like it's a good thing, but like from the very beginning, you see this adorable, cute little girl and she dies quickly. I'm like, oh, dude.
Yeah.
That felt like the movie going, this is what kind of movie I am.
Yeah. I texted Daphne when I watched the movie.
Yeah.
Because I was like, I'm starting to watch The Descent so we can do the podcast. And I was like, I totally forgot most about this movie. I forgot that it was abruptly depressing. Like, abruptly depressing is the words I used. I was like, oh, yeah, they start you off right there.
Right away.
And the way that things are presented, part of the whole cinematography and sound is there's a lot of jump scares and just like I said when we started, my nerves were kind of shot watching. Even before that scene with the whitewater rafting, they're going in these rapids and it's just like punctuated with the sounds of the water, and they're screaming and they're kind of smiling, but you also get the feeling maybe they're terrified and they're about to die. I mean, it turned out not, but that's what it felt like. And that they did that, like I said, it takes half the movie before you see the monsters, but before that they were like the scene where one woman takes a shower and she turns it on and she goes like it's scalding her, but it's just turns out it's nothing, and she's looking in the mirror, looking at her tongue, or the pole going through Sarah's head during the dream that she has in the cabin, the crows flying up and cawing as they hike to the it's like I kept getting this oh my god, stop that over and over again. And then when they get to the monsters, I mean, at least there, it's almost like at least with the monsters you're sort of expecting that, but there were a lot of little things before that where like Sarah's investigating, I think it's when or just like dripping water or something in its quiet moment, she turns and Juno jumps down right next to her, and in such a way that it's just like stop it. So
you can't anticipate it at all. It just kept happening.
Yeah, I mean, you're on edge the whole time waiting, and then when Juno was trying the other kinds of things, not just jumpy things, but Juno's trying to recover when they had to go across that chasm and set up that system. And then she came across, but she wanted to pull it because they needed all their equipment. She falls, and the other woman holding the rope, it comes through her hands and burns her hands. It's just like, God, that's so aggressively horrible.
Yeah.
It reminded me of when I was a kid and I hung a rope from a tree and slid down it, and you never want to do that.
It does not
blisters
feel
all
good.
over my hands. The bone sticking out of Holly's leg. No, I don't want to see that. And then when Juno killed Beth, like she was fighting the monsters and turns around and cuts Beth through the throat. I'm like, wow, that is so horrible. Just why do?
And to just leave her there.
I mean, just that the movie would do that to me. That's kind of how I felt like.
Yeah.
Wow. You just killed an innocent you had her kill an innocent person by accident. That's just the most, I mean, it's a horror movie. So, and then the crawlers like eating people's guts out. And then, the thing I mentioned when Sarah rammed her pickaxe through Juno's leg. At that point, before I'd had a chance to think about it, I was just like, that's too much. and it's depressing too. Like just the whole thing about her daughter and keep seeing her with the birthday cake and all of that. I mean, I'm a person who likes to explore all different kinds of emotions in my art, not just having it be the typical plot where you get to feel triumphant at the end. This has grief and horror and like just nerve jangling shock after shock. And I appreciate that. So I even though I feel like it was a mean-spirited movie, I enjoyed it. I thought it was very well done. I wouldn't want to watch 5 of these in a row, but I think it was very well made.
Yeah, no, for sure. Definitely not. It's a lot to take in.
Yeah, some of my notes just say like, this is a lot. It's like, it's a lot. It's like, or, this is like, there's a lot happening right now. Like they got into that cavern where they finally like all the animal bones are everywhere. And I was like, and then stuff just pops off. Like I was like, then there's 100 miles an hour for a second, because it was just like, wow, like things are happening. Like I thought I saw somebody like hit their head on a rock, but then they never really circled back to that. And so I was like, oh, okay. But, other than that, but I was like, yeah, these like creatures just attacking, like they jump on Holly and immediately like rip into her throat. And then you have Juno who's sitting there like fighting off these monsters because they're trying to drag away her dead friend, but she still is holding on to the fact like she doesn't want to let them have her. So she's like fighting with them to just like, no, don't take her away.
They're fighting for food though. That is the differences between the two.
Yeah. It's nature.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Which is so brutal. But as you're watching that, it was like, they're just trying to drag away their kill so they can eat. And she's like, that's my friend.
Mm-hmm.
That's
my friend.
Not only friend, but I think it's like Juno is like set up to be like a mentor to Holly. Like she's like taking her under her wing and like teaching her the ways of all these like the caving and stuff like that. And so
Holly was like the stereotypical super annoying person in the horror movie though.
Yeah.
This is going to be boring.
Way too reckless.
I like adventure. Yeah.
Yeah. But she's doing everything way too fast and running ahead of everybody. And yeah. But
like,
but it's hard to watch.
Happen to her. It did. But talking about fighting them off, I mean, one cool thing about it that we haven't talked about yet. Oh, I won't say it just in case it's one of your points, but I'll circle back.
No, you can say it. You can go ahead.
Yeah, go.
I mean, just that it's all women. Like that was so cool.
Definitely.
It just added something really cool to it. And I've seen women like this. My wife is a caver, so it's I know women like this, but it was just really cool to see a movie with all of them together and to have it be like somebody said this isn't caving, this is about ego or something like that. I thought that was cool because, people always ascribe that kind of a thing to only men, but women can be like that too. And Holly was like, she wanted to prove that she was the most badassest of all of them. And so there's some, they're flawed characters, but they're also super badass. And it was really fun to watch Juno just kick ass. And then Juno and Sarah at the end there kill like 4 or 5 of them right before Sarah shanked Juno. But it was just bad. There was a lot of badass moments too that were really cool.
Yeah, I have like they went in like full savage mode, especially Sarah. Yeah. As I have her, she's like kneeing one of them in the crotch. She was like, I don't know what that's going to accomplish, but go for it. But yeah, like she's like, putting her thumbs in the eyes of one of them, and just full on to her.
And she didn't start out that way.
Biting pieces of them off, like ripping it.
But also just the caving, like rappelling down, and especially when they were crossing that cavern. Yeah, that was a cool sequence.
Yeah, I put in there, I was like, somehow they're managing to trigger my claustrophobia and fear of heights at the same time.
Yeah.
And I have to give them credit for that.
Yeah, for sure. They definitely did.
But yeah, it's good. All right. So that was your number 1, Jason, right? So Daphne, what about yours?
My number 1 is Juno and her recklessness and badassery, which is not a word, but I'm making it a word today. I think right from the beginning, and we've already talked about a lot of this, so there's only really a couple points that I have that I want to bring up. I think we learn right from the beginning, Juno really, she's kind of self-centered. She's kind of disconnected from Sarah. I think she's kind of disconnected from the group as a whole. when you think about after the accident, she wasn't there for Sarah. But then she also can come off as being caring and more connected. So I got confused a few times because there were times that I was like, you are a badass. I am all down in this. This is good. She's strong. And then there were times that I'm just like, oh no, what a bitch. I mean, she even has to ask Beth at the beginning, so how is she? It's because she hasn't taken the time or the interest to even talk to Sarah. She wasn't there for her. And you could tell at the start, too, that all of the friends had kind of drifted apart, except for maybe Beth and Sarah. I think in doing this trip, she wanted to kind of repair the relationship with Sarah. I do think she may have felt some guilt about what happened. I think she felt guilty.
Totally.
And that's why she continued to say, I'm not leaving without Sarah. Sarah has to be with us. But I also feel like at times in the movie, she came across as a bit unhinged. Because she would shift from one to the other. Like, 1 minute she'd be really, like, scared, and then she went into this Rambo mode where she was just going and attacking things. And when she was fighting for Holly, and at that point, Holly was dead. But she was fighting for Holly. Like, she wanted to at least save Holly's body. It really did come down to, like I said, she was fighting against something that was looking at Holly not as Holly, but as food. And so watching her put everything she had into it to try to save what was left of Holly, I mean, it was really admirable and it was really badass. And, I felt for her there. Because I felt like that was a human. I saw her more as having humanity, I guess. She seemed more human at that point. But there were also moments where it seemed like she was unhinged. And so by the end, when she was with Sarah at the very end, to me, Sarah looked like she knew in her head something had snapped. She knew what she was going to do. She was ready to do it. And Juno starts to see that she's basically fucked because of everything that had happened. And I think, through that, like we talked about earlier, I think the fact that there was really no dialogue. It was really just Sarah asked a couple of questions and that was it. And then I think Juno knew she was completely fucked.
Yeah.
There's really...
Again, that look.
Yeah, I mean, as you're talking about it, I feel like, was that inconsistent maybe? Or, I mean, I think I lean more towards just complicated like people are, like Juno really did like Sarah as a friend and felt guilty and wanted to feel connected with her. But she is just the kind of reckless person that just does what she wants, and damn the consequences sometimes, including sleeping with your friend's husband or taking your friends to this cave that you lie to them about. And I feel like I know people like that who are just kind of reckless, but they have a big heart and
they have good intentions. They have good intentions.
Sometimes
they want,
I mean,
except when they don't. I mean, she wanted them to discover and explore these caves. She wanted them to be the ones to name them.
Yeah. Not a bad person, but like a selfish person, I think is.
Yeah. And reckless, like in a way that's not smart. And there are definitely people like that people who don't take precautions, and it would have just been an easy thing. Not that it would have done any good in this case necessarily, but to just tell somebody, hey, I'm going to go to this cave. Please don't tell Sarah and the girls because it's a surprise. Yeah. But if we don't come back, this is where we are.
But that is not what she did. And she made a unilateral decision that put all of her friends in danger without their knowledge. And it really came down to her ego. Like she wanted to name it. I'm not sure she wanted to name it for all of them. I think she wanted it for herself.
The thing is too, if she would have told them what she was doing, we're going to go to this unexplored cave and name it. I wouldn't doubt that everyone would be either immediately on board with that or able to be talked into it.
Yeah.
And then they would have been, complicit in the know. And
I would have felt better about it, I guess. If you can feel better about it.
But it's more interesting for a movie to have that moment where you're like, oh, what?
You've doomed us all.
You told them the wrong cave? God damn it.
And Rebecca like pieces it all together as they're going through. Well, this isn't what I was expecting.
Yeah.
This wasn't in the book.
And then you think back, that's why she left the map in the car or the book or whatever.
Mm-hmm. You said it would have been no point. Yeah, it would have been pointless.
Point. Doesn't need it.
Yeah.
That was another giveaway to me. At the beginning, I sensed that she and Paul were definitely in a relationship of some kind. And the necklace really proved that.
Yeah.
The book, I wasn't focused in on that the first run through. So I'm like, why is it a big deal that she's leaving her book? Like, I thought it was a reading book or something.
Yeah, no.
So she decided she's not going to have time to read. Why is that?
No. It was a map and it had it looked like there were some other things inside
kind
the
of
book.
A guidebook for the map, for the
cave.
Yeah,
for the cave.
Yeah.
And Rebecca had read the book. Like, she was prepared for this. She's like, it's only a level 2 where, we're going to be fine. She's reassuring her sister.
There's 3 ways in and out. Yeah.
She's a responsible person.
She should be planning your outings, not Juno.
Right. You should have learned. Because someone did say, she's always taking us out into the middle of nowhere. And then when Juno said, I've never gotten lost in my life, I'm like, well, they're going to be getting lost.
Yep, for sure.
You can tell that's coming up.
Definitely.
Yeah. So that was my number 1. I think that Juno, she was a badass, but she was reckless, and I think at times just a bit wild and unhinged. And at the end, I didn't dislike what she did to Juno, what Sarah did to Juno, but I didn't really want her to do it because I wanted Sarah to take the high road. I wanted her to not do that, I guess. But also, I mean, we see Sarah's descent into madness throughout this entire movie.
And it's not a feel-good movie.
No.
So it could have been a redemption arc for characters, but that's not what we're getting into. Yeah.
No. This is not a disaster film.
Yeah.
Which often will have some redemption for some people.
Right.
Not this time.
At least some of them survive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not this time.
All right. Well, my number 1, as I mentioned earlier, was the creatures, or as they're credited in here, the crawlers. But we've covered pretty much everything except for one little thing that I have, which is more of just idea that's not even like canon as far as I can tell, that not anything I've seen on the movie, but it's something that I thought about. And so I kind of went down my own little rabbit hole with it. I thought you might appreciate it. But I think the first thing that we really see is the cave painting that's in there, where they have the mountain and the caves in there and all the like animals. And it's a very like old, like Native American style cave painting.
Yeah.
Which I remember they're like, oh, that means there's another way out. We go this way. I was like, they're putting a lot of faith into a very old cave painting. But it sent me kind of on a thought that the creatures in this painting could be connected. And so I don't know if I want to say exactly what it is, because there's a video game, but if I tell you what game, then it spoils pretty much everything about the game. But I know Jason has played it, where immediately I thought of
Pac-Man.
Yes. These are Inky, Blinky, and Winky. No.
Yeah.
But no, I thought of the story, or I guess like kind of like a cryptid, but more mythological, or whatever, of the Wendigo or Wendigo.
Oh yeah. I was going to mention that. You know the game.
Oh yes, I do.
We can't say the game.
Yeah, I don't want to say it because it
gets spoiled.
Because if you haven't played that game, which it spoils the whole thing, the twist. But
we won't name the game. But this movie reminded me of the game, especially with the sounds that they make in the way they're all pasty white and the way they move around and stuff. Totally reminded me of that game. That's a great game, by the way. You guys should play it if you can figure out what we're talking about.
Yeah, if you can figure it out. It's like a Native American thing, but basically from what I understand about it, they're like kind of like this cryptid in a way, but it's like they're a cursed community group of people. They're cursed to where it's usually people who find themselves in these like stranded, lost, traumatic, disaster situations where, at least in that game, the way they set it up is if they resorted to cannibalism, then there's this curse that's put upon them that basically turns them into these mindless, flesh-eating, angry creatures. And so,
and they're trapped in caves in that game too.
Yeah, and they're trapped down in the cave systems. And so it's kind of makes me think, it's like, they see all this really, like the cave paintings, but also like the markings and like these old, like they said, the little like clip that was found where somebody had been down here before caving, but it was like 100 years old and nobody uses that technology anymore. It's like, maybe it's this other group of explorers or cavers or people who were down here and got stranded and lost and never made it out, and resorted to cannibalism at some point or something, to where now that has led to this system of these creatures that are now down here.
Yeah. I think you could be right.
Yeah. And so I kept waiting to see if they ever touched on that in the movie, and they didn't. But I was like, I wonder if that is some inspiration that like the director took for this.
Yeah.
He had a lot of different inspirations for the movie.
Mm-hmm.
So they found that old spike, and at first they thought that was a good sign. Oh, maybe they're, and then Juno's like, that's 100 years old. This is a bad sign, because if the cave wasn't named, that means whoever put this here never made it out. I was like, oh,
Yeah.
that's such a great little turn there. You think it's optimistic, and then it's not. But I think there were arrows, and that's what they were following. Like whoever those people were had marked their way down into the cave.
Yes.
With arrows. So I got a feeling that the arrows were not the same people that did like the Native American drawings, but I could be wrong. I don't know.
No, yeah. I mean, not necessarily. I think they are separate, but I think what it is there's this group of people, and then the Native American nod could be the just like Wendigo connection.
Yeah.
There's just kind of a little curse, like hint in there, like, oh, there's this. If people who know might pick up on this. Mm-hmm. And again, I don't know, because I haven't seen anything from the director or anybody saying that that's what it was, or they're hinting towards it. But that's what I thought of.
Yeah, it's a cool idea, because the first thing you think of is that maybe they're just evolved differently, but it's nice to have another possibility in there just to keep it a bit mysterious.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, so that's really, and then other than that, everything else that I had in notes were just about the creatures that, Daphne talked about earlier, is how they've adapted as more like, these like human bat kind of things, where they work with echolocation and blind, and then just kind of going over some of the scenes with them in it, were just some of these grisly deaths and stuff, which we talked about most of it. So I think the only one we really didn't mention too much was Sam. And you mentioned a little bit of like how it happened while she's hanging there in that little chasm. But then just that kind of, when she dies, she gets her like throat ripped out, and then she's like,
hanging
just
there,
laying there, and hanging upside down, and like the blood and everything's just streaming over her face and down. There's some like really grisly, like visuals. And I was like, man, this is brutal.
Yeah, not a lot of fun for them. That's for sure.
Yeah. Well, cool. Jason, do you have any extra notes or anything?
We've covered all of mine. The only one is, I thought it was kind of unbelievable when Sarah fell into whatever that was, the shit/blood pool or whatever. And then it turned out that one of the creatures was behind her, which maybe there was one following her we didn't see fall in, but maybe there was another one down there, or, it was just, okay, fine, that's fine. But then she stabbed it in the eye, and it like died immediately. Just like stab it in the eye and then no motion. So maybe it got all the way through to the brain right away. I just felt like that was a little too easy to take care of it.
Especially when it was so hard to kill the others.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think she killed another one after that by just like stomping on it. And it's like, okay.
At that point, she, I think, had snapped.
Like I'm, after doing this for so long, I usually come up with a list of nitpicks, and I really don't have, that was the only one that came to mind on this movie. I didn't have any nitpicks. Mm-hmm.
Daphne, do you have extra non-production tidbit notes?
Nope, we have covered everything that I had.
Cool. Let's see. I have a little bit. Let's see what I had. Mainly, I had like a whole like extra section. Call it my number 4, because it's not an official number. Just titled "Nope."
Nope.
Which was like covered some of that. I was like, like open up on whitewater rafting, which is like seems kind of fun, but at the same time, don't think that's my kind of thing, because I don't do too well with water either. So I'm also not too big a fan. But then it's these really small, tight places once they got into there, which I was like, hell no. Like that first passage after the first cavern, where like kind of what you mentioned, Jason, where like they're crawling through this little tunnel that's so tight that like it's barely bigger than their body. Like, there's absolutely no amount of money or reward or reason you could ever get me in that situation. Not gonna do it. Ever. And so, yeah, just like the claustrophobic stuff of this, I just had under like, no.
I mean, when she started panicking, it really reminded me of when I did almost the exact same thing. And I was like ready to panic. And then once I got through and I was in the larger cavern, I still felt like I gotta breathe so I don't panic here. And I'm like, what? This is fun? No, this is not fun.
No, that is not in the definition of having fun.
But I want to say, in case any cavers are listening, I admire, like, they get so into it, and it is beautiful, and if you're into it, I think that's great. And like mapping out all these caves or just having fun, I think it's awesome. And they're very also, if you're really into it, you're super careful about not desecrating, like not touching any stalactites and making sure not to mess it up at all, which I think is really cool, showing respect for the environment. Yeah,
more power to people who enjoy doing this, because like, from what I understand, I mean, like, it's less dangerous than like driving a car, something we do every day, obviously. Like, it's not, things happen, but it's very rare. And like you said, the people who do this on a regular basis aren't going into unexplored caves and not telling anybody where they're going. Like, it's professionals. People know what they're doing. And so
Jenny says the scariest parts are when there's water and you have to go underwater for a bit to get through a passage.
Oh,
she won't do that.
Gosh.
Yeah.
That is like combining way too many things. The panic. Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
I was like, I'm good.
No, I am not down for that.
But yeah, let's see. I didn't have many other notes other than just like little things. I said, like, the little jump scares. I was like, don't worry, Sarah. It's just a bunch of really bad CGI bats and Holly's almost decent impression of the Count. So you're good there.
That was funny.
Which, talk about Holly, yes, as you mentioned, she's way too reckless. As seasoned as she's supposed to be at this, she's moving too fast. She's flying across things. She's going ahead of people.
Yeah. And luck runs out.
And then, I think that's the only thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's all the other notes I had there. So cool. All right. So then usually we get into production notes and stuff. Daphne has some extra fun stuff.
I have some stuff. Okay. So originally Neil Marshall was going to pass on this film because he had already done horror, like Dog Soldiers, and he didn't want to be typecast as a horror director, but he decided to do it. The cast was originally going to be male and female, but the director wanted to go with an all-female cast at the suggestion of his business partner. It was also a contrast from his Dog Soldiers film. And every actress in the group is from a different country. So that's why we got lots of different accents. They did not use any real caves in the filming. Filmmakers considered it too dangerous and time-consuming to shoot in a cave. So the interior shots were filmed at Pinewood Studios in London, and the Maze of Caves was designed by Simon Bowles, who has worked with Marshall on some of his earlier films. One of the crevices that was built for the film was so slippery, it was nicknamed the Vagina.
That's amazing they made these. I mean, I thought when I was watching it that they filmed it in a cave.
Yeah.
I did. I immediately, first thought, I was just like, they must have found like a little cave system that they could crawl a crew into and then set up shots and film inside these caverns.
No.
So the fact that it's all man-made is really impressive.
Pretty cool.
Yeah. So we talked about already that there are two endings, so I'm not going to dive into that again. But the crawlers were designed to look like Nosferatu from the 1922 film. And it all connects when you hear that. Yes. The actors had to shave their body hair, and it took 3.5 hours to transform them into a crawler. And according to the director, the crawlers are descended from cavemen who never left the caves.
Or they're cursed.
Because
they were cannibals.
Shauna McDonald, who played Sarah, is slightly claustrophobic, so she found it very easy to act panicked underground.
Oh my God.
Can you imagine?
Oh, no.
Maybe it would be a little easier with that the caves were all manufactured, and so maybe not as claustrophobic as it looked. I don't know.
Yeah, because at least if you got stuck or started panicking, you'd be like, they can take this apart.
Yeah,
they can get me out of here.
Get me the hell out of here.
So the film's poster art was borrowed from a portrait photo by Philippe Halsman. It was his photo of a Salvador Dali female bodies as a skull painting, and I went and looked at it, and it's very, very similar with just a few changes.
Yeah, I've seen that before.
Yeah, it's really cool how they incorporated that in.
The Descent one, I haven't seen it or don't remember. But I did see that original painting, which is women laid out in the shape of a skull.
Yes.
Yeah.
Is that what the Descent
Very
is too?
similar, yes.
Yes.
Okay.
You can't really see the female body parts quite so well as far as, yeah. A sequel, The Descent 2, was released in December 2009 to mixed reviews and barely making back its $6.2 million budget. And the sequel moves forward as if the US version of the film was the movie's ending. And one last thing I found was Marshall cited the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, The Thing, and Deliverance as his influences in establishing the tension that we feel in The Descent. He wanted the tension to build slowly throughout instead of hitting you head on right at the beginning. So that is all I have for production notes.
Cool.
Awesome. All right. Well, next we have quotes, which I will be honest, I really did not even get many at all, other than I only have one, honestly, and I don't even remember who said it. Because they were all walking together, and Jason mentioned it, so I'll just kind of start with it. It's a quote that ties into that little nope thing that I mentioned earlier too, because it's where one of them, as they're walking together as a group, says, well, down there it's pitch black. You can get dehydration, disorientation, claustrophobia, panic attacks, paranoia, hallucinations, visual and oral deterioration, and it trails off from there. And I just went like, yeah, that's why I would never in my life be doing this. I don't want to deal with any of that. Like, give me plenty of reasons to see this. That's not my thing. Okay.
I believe that was Sam who said that, and she was the one that was training to be a doctor. So she should know that, all of that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, my quotes, I've got a couple. We did talk about one of them, so I'm not going to mention it. The first one is when Juno shows the group the entrance to the cave, Beth says, "Are you having a laugh? I'm an English teacher, not fucking Tomb Raider." I loved that quote right from the beginning. I'm like, that I'm totally bringing up. And then when Juno is yelling and attacking the crawlers to her while Becca and Sam are hiding, Becca says, "The noise she's making, she'll bring every one of those things down on her head." And Sam responds with, "As long as it's not on mine." And so,
some refreshing honesty there.
I feel like it fed into this thing where I don't think Juno is adored by everyone. I feel like she has this complicated relationship with the rest of the group.
Yeah.
Yes, and I've had friends like that where it's like, oh, they're good in small doses.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Yep. I think we all have those friends. All right.
And Jason, did you have any extra quotes or anything?
Yeah, let's see. When I kind of mentioned this one, but when they figure out that they're trapped and that Juno lied to them about the cave and they're in the wrong cave, and that because the first one would have been boring, Rebecca says, "This is not caving. This is an ego trip."
Yep,
that was good. I definitely had the Tomb Raider one. I like that.
Yeah.
And Juno, her key line is, we've always said, if there's no risk, what's the point? You got to take calculated risks. That's what I say to that.
Yeah.
And then the last one that I really liked is when Rebecca rigged that rope across the chasm. Was it Rebecca that did that? Like the terrifying monkey bars.
I think so. Yes.
And then Sam used the carabiner to slide across. And one of them goes, "Yeah, you make it look easy." And she goes, "Well, you make it look hard."
I love that. There was not a lot of funny in this movie, and I feel like we captured all the funny quotes like right now.
Right.
Yeah.
And that was, that kind of fits in with how relentless it was. There wasn't a lot of time.
Definitely.
Yeah, there definitely wasn't
have any breaks.
There were no breaks.
All right. And then we go to our rankings. We usually have kind of a rate the movie from 1 to 10. And mostly it's like, I like to put it like akin to Whose Line Is It Anyway? Or is, the rankings are made up and the points don't matter. The scores don't matter. Because if you look at like how we've ranked movies versus other movies, like none of it makes sense.
Right.
We just kind of roll with it. Just how do we feel in the moment?
Let's off some of the pressure.
Yeah, we just do it. It's just something we do. And recently we took a look at them to see kind of how things ranked out. And it's interesting that we're similar on... It worked out that we were similar on where we placed the movies on our list, but the points are a little funny. But it's cool.
You're like, that one should be the same.
I'm
score
sure, like, Karen and I used to rank all the Walking Dead episodes, and I tried to think, is this better than the one I've ranked the highest? No, so I can't rank it higher than that. But after a while, it's hard to keep track.
Yep. That's kind of how we are. But yeah. So, Daphne, where did you land on
Oh, my God. Oh, of course I'm first.
Always.
Okay. So, despite it appears like it's going to be this straight horror film, and it ended up being much, much deeper with the dual meaning. And the jump scares were pretty amazing and on point, and I love a good horror movie. So if I'm ranking this on horror and not on creatures, I would probably give it higher. But the creatures are pretty good too. So I think at the end of the day, I'm going to give it a 7.9, which is probably going to be way off from yours, Pake.
Actually, because I had mine, I mean, it's passing grade in the 7, but I had it pretty lower on there. But actually, I've changed it in my notes as we've been talking about it, because, you and Jason have brought up a lot of extra little things and certain like aspects of the movie. I'm like, actually, no, I need to give that more credit than I did. And so it's still in the 7, but it's a little higher. So I landed on a 7.6 myself.
Okay. I thought you'd be higher than me. So I was trying to be as high as I could be. Because like The Ritual, which we've talked about, this film was not on my favorites the first time through. Like, I obviously didn't ever watch it again. Mm-hmm. So, until now. So, I liked it more the second time through.
Yeah.
And the third time through.
Yeah. Why did you have it on your list if it wasn't one of your favorites to talk about on the podcast?
Because we like to talk about all different types of movies.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And the cool thing that has come out of this, bringing up The Ritual, is I didn't like The Ritual the first time through, but once I watched it through with a different eye, I appreciated it so much more. And so, yeah, we like to talk about all different types of movies, even if they're not our favorites.
Yeah. It's usually a good way to, like, kind of revisit movies that maybe, you didn't experience in the same way whenever you saw it. And you're like, I didn't like that, like that. Because it is, you've been podcasting for such a long time, Jason, that, it's like, when there's like a different view you watch stuff through as a podcaster. You're a lot more analytical and you're a lot more... And it helps you pick up on...
the podcast too and hear other people's points of views. It almost always helps me appreciate something more than I did before. Yeah.
Because you pick up on a lot more like... like small details and like director like choices and like little stories that they're telling. You pick up on that stuff when you're really analyzing.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's makes things a lot more better.
Art appreciation.
Yeah.
So I'll give it a 3. No, I'm just kidding.
That would make it lower than Thanksgiving, and I'm not sure that can be possible.
I don't know if that can happen.
No. I love when movies... I thought it was a simple movie, which is good. Like, I like when movies achieve what it feels like they're trying to achieve and set out. And I think this one totally did that. It's scary, and it's just this simple little like tension between the friends because of this thing that happened with her husband and everything. And it's bleak as hell, but I think that was intentional too. So, but on the other hand, it's not, I don't feel like it's super ambitious. And if a movie is really ambitious and it sets out to do that, then I like it even more. So, just keeping that all in mind, I'd probably give it like a 7.7, something like that, which is pretty good,
We're all kind of in the same area.
Yeah.
So I think that's good.
Awesome. All right, Daphne and Jason, it is time to get into a little bit of feedback for this week. I'm excited to see what people said. We got a little bit, one from Tony Douglas on Twitter. Again, she's been great hitting us up there, so I appreciate that. I will read that one. She says, excellent horror movie. Hits on so many levels, claustrophobia and monsters, and some human drama thrown in for some spice. Super gross, completely engaging, lots of fun.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
it sums it up pretty well.
What was I think, the claustrophobia in particular was really special for this one, or unique to it. So that was what this movie really brought that not a lot of movies bring. But then there was a lot of other, like the jump scares are pretty typical, but cool too.
Yeah, I think it definitely delivered on all of that.
Cool. Glad you enjoyed this one. We're doing some good stuff. We do have one voicemail. Yeah, of course. You got to have your voicemail from Steve Brown. So I'm interested to see what Steve has to say.
It's like a comforting blanket that you...
It is. When he misses a week, which he rarely does, it just doesn't seem the same without him. So let's go ahead and listen to what Steve had to say about The Descent.
I'm trying to watch Midnight Run, a freaking movie that I love with Robert De Niro and Charles Grodin, and I gotta send in a voicemail about The Descent. Okay, fine. Hi, Daphne, Pake, and Jason, guesting on Run for Your Lives. This is Steve. This is for The Descent. This is a freaking movie I am never going to watch because fucking spelunking is not something I'm going to ever do in my life. Especially if it's dark. Especially if you can't see. And so if I haven't used especially enough, I'm going to use especially several times because this especially movie is like, especially like I don't mind heights. I can do dogs, no snakes, but heights I'm good with, but enclosed spaces, I'm out, man. Elevators, I made out with a girl one time in Vegas in an elevator. It was just she and I. I can't imagine more than two people in an elevator. And I'm rambling because I will never watch The Descent. I'm just saying. I love you guys' podcast, though, and love you guys, so I will talk to you later.
He needs no descent, only elevation. Elevators.
Yes.
Oh,
man.
boy.
That's funny.
Gotta love feedback from Steve. Even when he doesn't watch the movies, he makes sure to give us something fun
Always.
to listen to.
We got a little insight, too, into Steve.
Yeah, that's different. I like how he always knows who's guesting on the podcast too. He keeps track. That's really thoughtful.
Yeah. Steve is great.
Great. All right. Awesome. Thanks for your feedback, Tony and Steve. Always appreciate it. And anybody else who has some thoughts for The Descent, if you've watched it after this has come out because it's piqued your interest, you can always give us feedback on anything that we've already recorded and talked about. We will read it and conversate with you anyway. So I'll go ahead and do a couple of shout outs for what else is going on in the podcast universe, as always. Again, you can always go and check out Strange Indeed with Rima and Ben covering The Stand on the CBS All Access miniseries. The most recent one was episode 5, Fear and Loathing in New Vegas, in which I was on that. I've been hopping on in and out of that series as they've been running through it for a couple of episodes. And so that one was a really fun one to talk about. And then if you want to hear more Steve, of course, you can always check out Panels to Pixels, where him and Mark talking about different, comic book, things adapted into TV and film. And of course, right now they are covering WandaVision. The first 2 episodes, they just put their episode out about that. And Mark and Laura also just covered Wonder Woman 1984. So if you've seen that and enjoyed that or even didn't enjoy that, definitely go check that out and see what they had to say about it. And then Mark also has his other podcast, Adrenaline Cinema, where they talk all things great action movies, classic action movies. Him and Diana from the Aim for the Head podcast just recently did a review of The Abyss.
That's cool. I didn't know she was on there. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And Rima was on Language of Bromance with her former Strange Indeed co-host Sean to talk about Wonder Woman too. That was interesting to listen to.
Nice.
Because I hated that movie so much. So I wanted to see what people thought.
Nice. I'll have to check that out. And then Jason, while we have you here, of course, the Podfather, as I referred to you earlier. you've got so much going on, a lot of great stuff. So why don't you fill everybody in? Where can they hear more of you?
These days, the main two things I'm doing are Walking Dead Cast in the House Podcastica and Walking Dead Cast. Actually, I see in your notes it says Lucy, she couldn't make this one because she's in the process of moving back to the UK. But we did Fight Club. I was kind of hoping she could come on because I know she has an interesting perspective of that. But I had my friend Eric on, who I've known for about 30 years. And he's the guy who, when we do our listener feedback and you hear all the zombie sounds, and then a guy goes brains at the end, that's him. So
that's great.
So anyway, we talked about Fight Club and that was really fun. I just put that out. And House Podcastica, we're still just frustratingly not being able to binge all of Cobra Kai because we're doing them 2 at a time, week by week. So most people have seen all the way to the end, but I haven't gotten to yet. It hurts. But anyways, we're just about to record for episodes 7 and 8 of that tomorrow. And I'm really, really enjoying season 3 of Cobra Kai. And you can find all that on podcastica.com.
It's hard when you love to binge watch things and you have to slow it down and not do it. You can't watch them all at once, because I'm definitely a binge watcher. And I, this year, have done a couple of series where I didn't watch the whole thing because I went week to week with Strange Indeed. It was hard, but I enjoyed it because I got a little more breakdown after each episode.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, when a show is weekly like Mandalorian, I prefer it as a podcaster because you get some time to really marinate and to experience it with everybody. But when it's available and then everybody else got to see it and I didn't, then it's harder. But it's still really fun. I do like drawing it out a little bit, you know. I mean, I love to binge things, but it's fun, especially when you're watching it doing a podcast and watching it with other friends and stuff, when you get to draw it out a little bit.
Yeah,
definitely.
I get that too.
Yep. I'll be excited for you guys to record on episodes 7 and 8, so I can listen to that, and then I can finally finish season 3 and I can watch the last 2.
But, so you're waiting with us. You're going.
I do. I go week to week with you guys. Man. I stick through it. I feel your pain.
A trooper,
it's so hard.
Which I'm used to doing it because I've done a couple of shows over on Strange Indeed now, and we do the week to week on Netflix shows and stuff too. We did Umbrella Academy and Bly Manor.
Rima's the queen of that. Yeah. I mean, she's done that so many times because they mostly cover Netflix shows, which are always available right on the first day.
Yeah, it's so hard. But I did do it twice, like I said, and I appreciated having that time to savor each episode instead of like inhaling it all at once. It was kind of better that way.
And then finally, of course, with stuff that's coming up on podcasts, Daphne, why don't you fill everybody else in on what is happening next week here on Run for Your Lives?
Next week we are covering The Monster. It was an American-Canadian monster horror film written and directed by Brian Bertino, and it was released on November 11th, 2016. And I can't remember where we heard about this one, but we decided that we would cover it. It's a little bit different, a little more horror, a little less monster, but still a lot of monster. If that makes sense.
Yeah, if you were a fan of the like personal drama of this movie, then this one cuts way deeper even on that.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. It's a heavy film, but I think it had some really good stuff to it. So it was fun to talk about.
It definitely was. I think we'll probably have a trigger warning though on this episode. I think we talked about.
Definitely.
Wow.
Yeah. There are some scenes in it that really, they were difficult to get through and difficult to talk about, but I feel like we did a really good job, and I'm looking forward to releasing that episode next week.
We should start a podcast about like the most disturbing movies and just watch like snuff films and stuff.
Oh,
God.
No, I'm
that
just
would
kidding.
be so
I would
depressing.
never watch anything like that. But there are some really disturbing movies out there, like that I haven't even
Our
seen.
debut episode, we're doing Cannibal Holocaust.
Oh,
Yeah,
no.
that's the one that always comes to mind. I haven't seen it. I don't think I want to.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat.
have seen it.
But we get pretty close with some of these horror movies sometimes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're
Cool.
really freaky.
Yeah, because talk about it messed with some people. Speaking, on Walking Dead Cast, you did recently do Host, that Shudder Zoom-based horror film, and that messed with some people.
Yeah, and I think even more disturbing are Ari Aster's movies, Hereditary and Midsummer.
Yeah.
those are pretty wrong, but I think they're very well done for what they are.
I think wrong is a great adjective, considering I've really determined that I'm not really a fan of Ari Aster's films. But
no, I know you're not alone.
No, not a fan, not really interested. Gave it both movies.
That's
Didn't
enough.
change my mind. So I think I'm going to stay away from that unless we decide to cover something. Unless he does a monster film that we should cover on the podcast, and then I guess I'll have to be brave and just watch it anyway.
Yeah. I know a lot of people who love that stuff, though, and yeah, I'm kind of on the fence about Ari Aster. I'm like, I see what he's doing, but it's not necessarily my cup of tea, but I appreciate, and the people who love it, I get it.
Yeah, I'm one of those. I was just pretty floored by Midsummer in particular, but
cool.
I haven't met many other people like me.
Awesome. Well, if you have any feedback or anything that anybody would like to submit for The Monster or for The Descent or anything else that we've covered or you want us to cover, you can always submit theories, feedback, and thoughts to our Facebook page at facebook.com/runforyourlivespodcast. You can email us or send us voicemails like Steve at runforyourlivespodcast@gmail.com. Or if you want to be like Tony and hit us up on Twitter, you can find us at RFYL Podcast. You can hit us up at Instagram, at Run For Your Lives Podcast. And if you're enjoying the show, tell your friends, share the love. We are easy to find. You can just go to the website, runforyourlivespodcast.com, and you can find links to all of our social media and also all of the different podcast players. We're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Audible, Pandora, YouTube. Anywhere you want to find us, we're probably there. So,
definitely.
And if you go to Apple Podcasts, leave us a review. Give us 5 stars. Share some love. Make us smile. Appreciate it.
All right. Well, with that, we've come to the end of our show. I want to thank Jason for being here with us to discuss The Descent.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. It was great. Thank you for giving me a chance to watch this movie that I've been meaning to watch for so long. And it was really, really fun to get to talk about it with you guys.
I'm glad. You'll have to come back anytime you want.
Let us know.
Cool.
Doors open.
Okay, well, I want to watch Airplane, so whenever you guys are ready for that.
I'm not sure that fits. But I'm sure we can find another one. That will.
Airplane 2, that's pretty good.
Snakes on a Plane. There's a
Snakes
good
on a
meat
Plane.
middle ground.
Meet in the middle, yeah. I've never seen that
You've
one.
not seen Snakes on a Plane. Well, I think we have found the next one to cover. It's one of my favorites. One of my guilty pleasure favorite movies.
Nice.
And with that, we have reached the end of our show. As I said, thank you everyone for listening. I'm Daphne.
And I'm Pake.
And if you have to run, especially from crawlers descending upon you from the roof of a cave, you better run for your lives.
Bye-bye.